I am reading each beginning also I am reading because then it's a sort of revision, no problem. Nietzsche's insistence upon war as an aspect of life and the ideal man as a warrior. The camel man he may be to begin with, and the child man afterward, hereafter. But the lion man he must become in the middle if he is to attain his perfection. These now much decried theories of Nietzsche have, however much we may differ from many of the moral and practical conclusions he drew from them, their undeniable justification and recall to us a truth we like to hide out of sight. Huge para, but what he's saying is that Nietzsche had a glimpse of the truth, like Heraclitus. Heraclitus also had a glimpse of the truth because he went up to the fire element, ether, water, earth, water, fire, air, ether. So Heraclitus had gone up to the standard of the fire, and he said that war is the father of all things. So now Nietzsche is somewhat repeating that same idea that war is inevitable when you are in the lower level of consciousness. Okay, so and Srimla is a very interesting sort of almost like an apothegm, like a aphorism. We'll see that later on. But what he's saying here is that Nietzsche's idea that you must be strong, okay? You must be a lion man and not a camel man. Okay? In the beginning, you can, he's saying very clearly, camel man, then child man, and then finally he says you must be a lion man. That means to say you have to evolve and become powerful. And he says that many of the ideas that he had, that the Aryan race, you have to become an Aryan race. There is light. Oh, you cannot hear me now? Now you can hear me?
We can hear, I can hear you, Rangadhar.
Yes, we can hear
you.
Okay, no, I got a message that you can't hear me. No.
I can hear.
Okay. So he's saying that Nietzsche had a glimpse of the truth, but not the entire truth. And the way he portrayed that truth in the physical world has been much misunderstood. That's why he calls Nietzsche a blind seer. He saw the truth, but he could not understand fully the truth. And he said that you have to be strong. But strength is not the only thing. Na? There is also consciousness. There is also a gentleness in things. But the fact that war is essential also, and that strength and destruction also is necessary, we don't like to see that. We like to push it under the carpet. We don't want to. How can God be destroying everything? So when you are a weak person identified with your lower consciousness, you don't like violence. And that's why there are so many theories that ahimsa is the best dharma. Not true at all. Okay, that's what he's saying. So Nietzsche also, and many of his moral ideas were afterwards rejected by many people, and many people also say that Nietzsche is not saying this. But the whole idea of Nazism came because you are a superior race and you have the right to dominate over others. And that's why they had to eliminate the Jews, okay? The Holocaust of the Second World War. 6 million Jews were killed because they depended on this theory that we are superior and the inferior must be destroyed. So Srimla is saying that however much it was misinterpreted, there is a basic truth in what he's saying. And what is that truth? The divine can be very kind, but it can also be very violent, because violence is one of the possibilities of Shakti. Why should Shakti be only sweet and mellifluous? He used the word mellifluous on top, okay? Very, very soft and sweet. No, the divine can also be very strong. When necessary, he can send a typhoon, he can send a cyclone, okay? He can destroy with fire. So that's what he says. I told you that we are in the Kurukshetra, and Kurukshetra is a war to destroy the undesirable. That's why he is justifying that. Now, I read the next big sentence, but that's basically what he said. Many of the theories of Nietzsche were decried. But there is no doubt about it that he did go to the self, because there's a whole book on Nietzsche, Beyond Good and Evil. Okay? The title of the book is Beyond Good and Evil. Now, when you say that you have to go beyond good and evil, obviously you are at this level of the self. You can't see beyond good and evil when you are in a moral condition. When you are in an ethical consciousness, you can't see that. You can see that only when you go to the higher level of consciousness, the higher mind. When you are in the self, you see that all our ideas of the dualities are wrong. They are not opposites. They are complementary aspects. So that's why Nietzsche was a seer, but he could not understand the entirety. That's what they're saying here. I read that the camel man is one who is an ordinary man. The lion man is one who has got strength. Okay, and the child man is the one who is developing. So this is how he explains. But since these are all images, people have misunderstood. They have all said you have to be the lion man, and Nietzsche was a German. So all the Germans, Aryan race, okay, they decided that they have the power to dominate over others. So that was the much decried theory that Srinath is talking about. However much we may differ from many of the moral and practical conclusions he drew from them, their undeniable justification and recall to us a truth which we like to hide out of sight. And what is the truth? War is inevitable so long as you are in the lower consciousness. That's the thing. Okay, I go to the next sentence. It is good that we should be reminded of it. Okay? First, because to see it has for every strong soul a tonic effect. That means the strength is justified, okay? Which saves us from the flabbiness and relaxation encouraged by too mellifluous, philosophic, religious, and ethical sentimentalism. Sentimentalism is sentiment which is superficial. You don't like violent things. You like only soft things. So that is mellifluous is a very interesting word. No? Mellifluous, flowing very softly and sweetly. And sentimentalism is different from emotion. Emotion can be deep, but it can be very, very realistic. It will recognize that power also is an aspect of the divine. Okay? So, which that loves to look upon nature as love and life and beauty and good, but turns away from the grim mask of death, adoring God as Shiva, but refusing to adore him as Rudra. Rudra is as the Shiva and Rudra are actually the same, but two different aspects. Shiva is the auspicious aspect of the divine. Okay, but he is also Rudra, because when he is dancing, he is destroying. Okay, so that we don't like to see because we are weak. We don't have the courage to see something strong. We discussed that last time. You remember, most of our human beings, we don't like violent scenes. We shy away from them. We gave many examples also of how we can't bear to see. I gave you the example of people who faint by seeing blood, people who get nervous when they see someone suffering in the street. We discussed epilepsy also last time, if you remember, because I remember when I saw an epileptic fit, I saw many people quickly running away from there. They could not stand that scene, the violent scene of that suffering. They could not see. But you must have the capacity to be able to look straight in without being disturbed and help if possible. Okay. There were some people who did go and help him, that man who was suffering the epileptic fit, but everybody can't do that. So that's what Sindh is saying. It is good to be reminded that there is an auspicious aspect of the divine, Shiva, but there is also a violent aspect of the divine, Rudra, force, Shakti. That also we must not forget. Because unless we have the honesty and courage to look existence straight in the face, we shall never arrive at any effective solution of its discords and oppositions. This is a very interesting thing. You must know the nature of the defects and the opposition that you're facing. Even in ordinary, even in the physical world, when you want to conquer an enemy, you must know what his weaknesses are and his strengths. And you have to conquer the weaknesses. You have to hit at the weaknesses. Even in war, it's a strategy. That's why you have to send spies out to find out the weakness of the enemy. And you can't know the weakness of the enemy unless you are very calm and quiet and look realistically at your enemy. And then you have to destroy it. So calmness and quietness is absolutely essential. And then once you have seen that, you have to use your force to destroy that which is weak and intolerant in you. Okay? We shall never arrive at any effective solution of discords and oppositions unless we realize the totality. The divine can be soft and sweet and mellifluous, but he can also be in a destructive mood. If he wants to be something that has to be eliminated, he has to do that. And note interestingly also that in the physical world, there is constant construction, but there is also constant destruction. The two always go together. You can't have a new construction unless the old is removed first. Yeah? If the old is removed, how will you put? If you have an old crumbling house, you have to destroy it and put up a new one. There's also another thing which nowadays we use. We do what is it called? To renovate. We renovate the house. So that is also possible, but ultimately you have to destroy and create a new thing. I go to the next sentence.
We always have in the stories also, no, that there is a weak point. Even Shiva, when he gives boon, he keeps a weak point for the other to conquer
Yes.
that.
Yes, that's right. Yeah. Now look at what happened to Arjuna's son. Nah? He knew how to get into the chakra view.
Yeah.
Nah?
Yeah.
That's what we are referring to. Yeah.
Yeah.
But he
Yeah.
didn't know how to come out.
Yes.
You
So
have to know both.
he gives everything, but then he keeps hiding one thing where you are vulnerable. No.
That's also another one. That is the story of Duryodhan.
Duryodhan, yeah.
Remember?
Yeah.
Yeah. He goes to
Duryodhan,
his mother and his mother tells him to come with naked.
yes.
And Krishna realizes that no, that's going to make him absolutely immortal and omnipotent. So he suggests to him, how can you go to your mother in a naked condition?
Yeah.
Hide your loin. Below the belt, hide yourself. And that becomes the weak point. And Sri Krishna's trick works. And then Bhim is able to, with his gada, he hits him below the belt and kills him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Even in
That's
Greek,
exactly.
even in Greek story, no, Achilles he has a weak
That's
point.
right. Yeah. Achilles is heel, correct? Okay. So this is what Prem is saying, that you must know and you must be able to face realistically everything. And that which is weakness, you have to destroy. And destruction cannot be done without violence. You have to use violence. The problem is that when we think of violence, we automatically associate with it hatred, disgust, okay, and dislike, okay, and disturbance in the being,
Thing, no,
anger.
Rangada.
But
Yeah,
there is also
That's
an
one thing, no? Violence is always with hatred or revenge. In the human area, when you go above the human consciousness, then there is no difference in that way.
that's right.
but
Because at
also,
the
also
higher
Rangada,
level, higher
Rangada,
level of, yes, tell me.
no, also there is an attachment for which we are not only hatred, but you don't want to destroy because there is an attachment to that thing also, no? Somewhere.
That's right. That's right. All these things belong to the lower consciousness. And when you go to the higher consciousness, you can use pure force without dislike, without anger, without attachment, and you see the reality of what is to be done, and you do it calmly and quietly. That's right. That is what is being discussed here in this chapter. And it's so important to understand this that he has got 3 chapters on it. Okay? 3 chapters. Then he's saying, in another place also he says that you cannot go to Vishnu Vishnu is the calm, quiet person, the divine, without paying your debt to Rudra. First, you have to get rid of your consciousness which sees violence as something negative. Then only you can you can have peace in the world. That, in other words, you have to pay your debt, get rid of the weakness, go to the higher level. Then you can use your force in a very in the correct way. But force is always necessary, but not violence, hatred, anger, disturbance, attachment. All these things are got to be removed. So that's what he's saying. Okay, we go to the next sentence. We must see first what life and the world are, very, very realistically. There is so much in the world that has to be destroyed. Okay. Afterwards, we can all the better set about finding the right way to transform them into what they should be. Okay. This question is discussed also in the Life Divine. It's very interesting. He's saying, I think I told you now about Robert Browning's poem, Pippa Passes. Okay. So I think one of you know the poem. I think it was
Yeah.
Tarika.
Yeah.
You remember the lines?
The all is right with God is in his heaven and all is right with the world.
Yeah, and all's right with the world. All is not right with the world. It's a very shallow optimism. So you should not have a shallow optimism and saying, oh, everything is perfectly okay. Everything is fine. There are many things which are not fine in the world and you have to destroy them. So a shallow optimism is of no use at all. It doesn't solve the problem. You have to have a deep, realistic attitude and see what has to be destroyed, and then only you can enjoy the calm and sweetness of the world. Okay, so we must see first what life and the world are. Afterwards, we can all the better set about finding the right way to transform them into what they should be. Okay, even negative things are only distortions of the truth, but you can't solve the problem without knowing how to do it. Okay? You have to have the power to see the reality and then do what has to be done. Simply to say that the world has been created by the devil and the divine is not capable of creating all this, that's a shallow optimism. That's not true. Yeah,
No,
you're
but
saying something. Tell.
if we have that deep faith that God is God is in heaven and all right with the world, that also has a truth in it, no? Because I mean, deeper truth in it, because that faith is there. That is, if whatever God has created, it is right in that sense.
Yeah, but the shallow optimism, only when you are stressing one aspect, it's not true. There's an element of truth. That is true. Everything is relative in the physical world. No? So when there is negative and positive, you have to see not only the positive, but you have to see also the negative. There is a truth in it, but that truth is not complete. The complete truth is you have to see both. Okay. So then he says you can have if this repellent aspect of existence holds in itself some secret of the final harmony, we shall, by ignoring or belittling it, miss the secret, and all our efforts at a solution will fail by fault of our self-indulgent ignoring of the true elements of the problem. The true elements of the problem are that the one becomes the many, and the one becomes the many. The divine creates sweetness and harshness. He in gentleness and so-called cruelty. It's not so-called. He also creates the soft breeze, but also the cyclone. Okay, for him it is not negative. He is just creating all the possibilities, the infinite possibilities. When we are at the lower level, we don't see that. Okay, we see everything in terms of negatives and positives. But there is no such thing as negative and positive for the divine. Everything is only infinite possibilities. Okay, that's what he's saying. If this repellent aspect of existence holds in itself some secret of the final harmony. So what is that final harmony? All the possibilities of the universe, they are there in the supramental world, and all the oppositions and the contraries disappear into a beautiful harmony. They are not contradictions anymore. It will become like the orchestra, 100 instruments all playing different things. Multiplicity is there. There's a difference between unity and uniformity. The world should not be uniformity. Everybody is wearing the same thing, speaking the same language. No, there has to be multiplicity. There has to be multiplicity. Yeah, that's it. Okay, and not only oneness. Both are there. So that's what he's saying. If we miss it, then our self-indulgent ignoring. Look at the words. You are ignoring the something which you dislike because you're weak. You can't face it, and you are indulging in it. Okay, of the true elements of the problem. The true elements of the problem is look at both and find a solution. If, on the other hand, it is an enemy to be beaten down, trampled on, excised, eliminated, still we gain nothing by underrating its power and hold upon life or refusing to see how firmly it is rooted in the effective past and actually operative principles of existence. Okay? When the so, complicated language, but very clear what he's saying. If on the other hand, you don't see what is wrong with it, how will you set it right? That's what he's saying. It's an enemy to be beaten down, trampled on. Now look at the language. Okay? Sometimes you have to beat him down, you have to trample on him, you have to excise him, cut him to bits, eliminate him. Still we gain nothing by underrating its power and hold upon life and refusing to see how firmly it is rooted in the effective past and the actually operative principles of existence. The actually principles of existence are operative. It is constantly there in the physical world. There is destruction and there is also construction. But you can't see only the positive aspect. You have to see the negative aspect also. That's what he's saying. Okay? Very clear what he's saying. So now can we go to the next one? War and destruction. One of you has to read.
Shall I read?
Oh yes, go ahead. War and destruction.
Okay. War and destruction are not only a universal principle of our life here in its purely material aspects, but also of our mental and moral existence. It is self-evident that in the actual life of man, intellectual, social, political, moral, we can make no real step forward without the struggle, a battle between what exists and lives and what seeks to exist and live, and between all that stands behind either. It is impossible, at least as men and things are, to advance, to grow, to fulfill, and still to observe really and utterly that principle of harmlessness which is yet placed before us as the highest and best law of conduct. We will use only soul force and never destroy by war or any even defensive employment of physical violence. Good. Though until soul force is effective, the Asuric force in men and nations tramples down, breaks, slaughters, burns, pollutes, as we see it doing today. But then, as its ease and unhindered, and you have perhaps caused as much destruction of life by your abstinence as others by resort to violence. Still, you have set up an ideal which may someday and at any rate ought to lead up to better things. But even soul force, when it is effective, destroys. Only those who have used it with eyes open know how much more terrible and destructive it is than the sword and the cannon. And only those who do not limit their view to the act and its immediate results can see how tremendous are its after effects, how much is eventually destroyed, and with that, much all the life that depended on it and fed upon it. Evil cannot perish without the destruction of much that lives by the evil, and it is no less destruction, even if we personally are saved the pain of a sensational act of violence.
Yeah. This is a very, very deep paragraph, and we have to, it's a very subtle one also. So when we are discussing it also, you will find many people understand what he's saying. You have to go very deep into it. In fact, this whole paragraph is an answer to Gandhi's idea of absolute non-violence. Absolute non-violence does not work in the physical world. You have to see what has to be destroyed, and you have to destroy that. We'll discuss that. It will take a little time. We have the time. We have about 15 minutes. So we'll see slowly. But I am warning you. You have to understand this in a very subtle way. Okay. Already we have discussed the previous one also is fairly subtle. But we have to be very, very realistic and see what we say. Now, we start reading each sentence. War and destruction are not only a universal principle of our life here in the physical world, okay, in its purely material aspects, but also of our mental and moral existence. In other words, war, physical violence is not the only thing. Sometimes you have to use violence in even psychological condition. You have to battle your own problems. You have to battle your own defects. You have to battle your own egoism, your own attachments. You have to kill them. In fact, sometimes in Savitri, he says you have to uproot desire by its bleeding roots. You have to be so ruthless. Bleeding roots, he says. Okay. So this is what you have to understand, that you have to use violence sometimes. But Gandhi, what was his idea? He said that, okay, I'm telling you. He said, let the British beat me. I don't mind. Can they destroy my soul? They can't destroy my soul. So they may destroy my body, but they can't destroy my soul. Now, Srimad is answering that. Okay. He says that even soul, okay, has a tremendous effect. The soul also can have very great action in the physical world. Not immediately, but afterwards it comes. Okay? So this is what he's saying. Now look at what happened in India. Okay, Buddha's soul force. Okay, he gave a tremendous solution to pain and suffering in the world. It was a soul force. But what did it do? It tremendously destroyed the Indian civilization for 2,500 years. Now there is a slow recovery. We went completely onto the wrong track. Okay? You said the physical world is not real. So it was a very negative influence. So that is exactly what he's saying, that even soul force is very great. And you don't think that soul is always sweet and gentle and all. Okay? It can have many negative effects also. Also, he's saying that when you think that you are not doing something positive, okay, and that you are being very, very kind, that also can create a lot of problems. I'll give you one example as we come to it. Okay? Simply being very kind to people is no solution at all. You have to be very carefully see what has to be destroyed. War and self-destruction are not only universal principle of our life here in its purely material aspects, but also of our mental and moral existence. You have to fight your mental difficulties, you have to fight your ignorance, and moral also, you have to fight your all the so-called sins that are there. You have to fight them. It is self-evident that in the actual life of man, intellectual, social, political, moral, we can make no real step forward without a struggle, a battle between what exists and lives and what seeks to exist and live, and between all that stands behind either. Okay? When we have wrong ideas, we have to destroy those ideas and go forward. Okay? So that is exactly what he's saying. But we don't think of it as destruction, but it is a destruction. Otherwise, how can progress come? There's constantly you have to do. Okay, it's there. Srimad saying very interestingly, intellectual. Okay, we can give examples to each of you think out. Intellectual, you have wrong ideas. You have to go above. So you have to destroy the wrong idea. We don't think of it normally as a destruction, but the old ideas have to be destroyed. So, and you have to go to the new ideas. For instance, see, very gross example that the God created the world in 1 week. Okay, then the intellectual idea at the intellectual level, Science came to know that no, there's an evolution. It's taken hundreds and thousands and millions of years. So that's an idea which had to be negated. It had to be destroyed. It is still not destroyed. In the West, they still don't accept the theory of evolution. They don't. They want to go back to the Bible. Social also. There are so many things that have been destroyed. Na? There is murder, there is thieving, there is lying, there is falsehood. All that has to be eliminated. There is injustice. Okay? All that has to be eliminated. In India, it's very clear. We have such a tremendous injustice towards the Dalits. Okay? They are not allowed to take water from a well that belongs to the higher caste. They have to be segregated. They can't marry in between the castes. So much of social injustice has been there. All that has to be destroyed. And you can't destroy that by sweetness and gentleness. No, it won't work. At the political level also, you have to constantly negate the wrong right. Morally also the same. So Srinath is very clear. He's saying intellectually also, socially also, politically also, morally also, you have to use strength and you have to battle that which has to be destroyed. We can make no real step forward without a struggle, a battle between what exists and lives and what seeks to exist, that which wants to go beyond. Okay? A good example of that is the ego was the helper, but now you want to go beyond, you have to destroy the ego. Ego becomes a bar. Okay? Same thing with the mind. The mind is a helper, but the mind becomes a bar, and you have to destroy it. In fact, the silencing of the mind in Indian philosophy is often known as the death of mind. Thought has to be killed and live, and between all that stands behind either. So this is what you have to do. You have to go to something which is beyond the sweetness and the violence. And that is the harmony between the two. But you can't look at only one side and say the other side doesn't exist. It is impossible, at least as men and things are, to advance, to grow, to fulfill, and still to observe really and utterly that principle of harmlessness, which is yet placed before us as the highest and the best law of conduct. Who is doing this? There are many who do this. Okay, you must be kind and sweet. You must never be cruel. You must never be. As I told you, all our ideas of cruelty and all that is because we are constantly associating anger and hatred and rancor against all this. But it can be done without all these things. Then the use of force is perfectly valid. Okay? Which is yet placed before us as the highest and best law of conduct. Ahimsa. Okay? In fact, I don't know if you know the history, but in the Indian freedom struggle, for Gandhi, the independence of India was less important than Ahimsa. I don't know if you know that. When he started the Quit India movement, he wanted it to be peaceful and it was fine. But one day what happened was, in a police station in Chaura Chori, there was a problem and they burned down the police station. You know what Gandhi did? He called off the whole movement. The Quit India movement was revoked. He said, I won't allow non-violence. I won't allow violence. So that became more important than India's independence. So you can't remain only on the Ahimsa principle. Okay? There are more important things also. You know that incident about Chaura Chori, no? Otherwise you go to the internet and check. Okay? You will see what I'm saying is absolutely a fact. Okay? He called up the whole movement. There was great disappointment in India when that happened. The principle of harmlessness cannot be put on you as the highest and best law of conduct. That's what he's saying. Ahimsa is very good principle, but it's not the only principle. In fact, what happened in 1942, when the Muslims started what they call direct action, okay, and they started killing the Hindus in Calcutta, Sri Aurobindo in Pondicherry was saying, why don't the Hindus organize themselves to counterattack? Why should you tolerate this hatred? You have to counterattack. So Ahimsa is not the only principle and certainly not the highest principle. Very, very clear, Sri Aurobindo is saying. that principle of harmlessness, which is yet placed before us as the highest and best law of conduct, that is not always effective. You have to see the other side also. We will use only soul force. Okay, so now the argument that no, I will not use any force in the physical world, but I will use soul force. Now Siddha is going to answer that. Okay, we will use only soul force and never destroy by war or any even defensive employment of physical violence. I won't even protect myself. That's exactly what happened. If you have seen that film Gandhi, okay, done by Richard Attenborough, okay, that's what Gandhi said. Let them beat, doesn't matter, let them beat me. And mercilessly the police were beating these people and they were falling down injured, but he wouldn't call up the movement, okay. Okay, sir. So they're saying that. See what he's saying. We will use only soul. This is a question, huh? It's a rhetorical question. We will use only soul force and never destroy by war or any even defensive employment. I won't even defend myself. Even defensive employment of physical violence. I will never defend myself with violence. There is a very interesting story about this principle in Ramakrishna's life. Okay, Ramakrishna tells a story. The snake is supposed to be a violent one and it kills with poison. Okay? So the Guru was saying gentleness is the principle in life. So the serpent said, oh, okay, fine. So he started applying that principle. And when someone started throwing stones at it, it did not retaliate. And it got hurt, badly injured, and went to that Guru again and told him that you told me to have gentleness and never to bite with poison. And so what happened? I am suffering from it. So the Guru answered him, I told him to be gentle, but I did not tell you not to do posh. You know, that you know what is that posh? You have to frighten the other person. So frightening the other person also is a sort of violent action, but it can be effective. So you can't really depend only on that which is sweet and soft and gentle. You have to also be realistic and see the opposite. I told you it's a very, you have to think about it deeply. Okay, it is a bit subtle. Sometimes it sounds very, it depends on the words we are using. Okay, but you have to understand that both are necessary. So, Sam is answering this question. He's saying, I will never use physical force, but I will use soul force to fight my enemy. But if you are using soul force to fight your enemy, it is violence at the soul level. That's what he's saying. Sam is answering. So he raises a question and he's answering. Good, very good. Don't use physical force. Good, very good. Though until soul force is effective, can you do you have the power to use soul force? That's what he's asking. The Asuric force in men and nations tramples down, breaks, slaughters, burns, pollutes, as we see it doing today. But then at its ease and unhindered. And you have perhaps caused as much destruction of life by your abstinence as others by resort to violence. Now, this is a very interesting and subtle thing what he's saying, that if you don't use physical force, you may be doing even more harm in future. Okay. So this is something that you can see in the physical world, that when you don't protest, okay, the opposite force becomes even more violent. So that doesn't solve the problem. That is what he's saying. Okay. Note interestingly also that the English would never have left India unless there was a threat of violence. And that violence threat came from Subhash Bose. Okay. You must know a little bit of history, because after the British left, okay, Ramsay MacDonald, the Prime Minister of India, Prime Minister of UK, after he was not Prime Minister anymore, he came to India and he was discussing with a family in Calcutta, the Bose family, and they raised the question that, why did you people leave India in such a hurry? Suddenly, you decided to leave. He said, you know what? He said, what was Gandhi's approach? So they said Gandhi was least a cause for our leaving. Because all we have to do is to put him into jail. That's all, nothing else. It was Subhash Bose, he said. that who was threatening with his violence. Okay, and because when Subhash Bose was doing that, I know that Subhash Bose is not appreciated in Pondicherry, and I'll tell you why also. Because the idea was wrong. But all ideas are partially true and partially wrong. He was wrong in siding himself with the negative forces. But the violent aspect was the right one, because when he started having this and deciding that we will make the national INA, the Indian National Army, there was a great revolt of the Navy in Bombay and also in Uttar Pradesh. There was a whole army that revolted. But Gandhi said, no, 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 we don't want a revolt. We don't want this sort of revolt. So it quietened down. But the British accepted later on that they left India because if the army was revolting against they would be nowhere in the picture. They would be eliminated. So you have to sometimes use violence, but without hatred, without rancor, without anger. That's the whole point. Normally we associate the two. That's why the problem in understanding this. Okay. So Swami is saying that when you don't use force, sometimes you are making it even worse. The problem gets worse. When you think that you are being gentle, it doesn't solve the problem. Okay. That was also the mistake that we made in India. Okay. The appeasement of the Muslims, that was a mistake. We were constantly encouraging them to assert themselves. Why? Because you are a minority, you should be protected. That is true, but not overprotected. Then they become dominant and they created so many riots in India because of that. There were riots in, recently also that Godhra violence was initiated by them. Then there was the Noakhali riots, okay? Then there were the riots in Calcutta. All these riots were all initiated by them because they were being encouraged. So this is a very subtle thing, and you have to know a little bit of history also to know what he's saying here. Okay, what's the time? Oh, it's almost time. But we'll try and finish. So Swami is saying, but even soul force, okay, when it is effective, destroys. Don't think that soul force is only gentle. Soul force can also destroy subtly. Okay, only those who have used it with eyes open know how much more terrible and destructive it is than a sword and the cannon. In fact, there is an English saying, no? The pen is mightier than the sword. You remember that, no? The pen is mightier than the sword. So, and only those who do not limit their view to the act and its immediate results can see how tremendous are its after effects. Soul force. How much is eventually destroyed, and with what much, and with that much, all the life that depended on it and fed upon it. So sometimes soul force can have tremendous effect. So don't think that it is only for the idea that soul force is always gentle is not true. Evil cannot perish without the destruction of much that lives by the evil, and it is no less destruction, even if you personally are saved, the pain of a sensational act of violence. Individually, if you are very gentle, okay, you may be, the violence may be saved in you, but at a universal level, at the world level, it does not work. That's what it is. So think about it and read that para again very carefully, and you will see how violence and force and destruction are necessary elements in the physical world in its untransformed condition. That's the whole point. Okay, we stop here today. Next time we'll do moreover every time we use soul force. Okay, that's another thing. Yeah. Okay.
Merci beaucoup.
Okay.